First of all, Marty, thank you for having me again at your conferences. I love speaking with you on the panel and all these folks. I'm going to be speaking this morning. My name is Peter Lewis on a topic which is near and dear to me, which is the future of real estate. My firm, Wharton Equity Partner, has been obsessed with always looking ahead and studying the future. And
it's function page down. So page down and function. Function page down. Then go over. Scroll.
Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. I'll just see what we So get to the second page. Anyway, so my firm has been focused on kind of always looking ahead, and so what I'm going to do this morning quickly is just talk about some of the big macro changes that I see confronting the industry, and then I'm going to get into specifics about certain types of asset classes, and we'll have some fun. And then I'm going to lead with a kind of a small case study that we on a deal we recently did that kind of encapsulates everything we're going to talk about before that. So when Marty gets this up, we'll talk about it. But I will start by just saying that go to the next page. There we go. Okay. Could you slide it down a little bit so that we can just get there? There you go. Perfect. All right. So this is a little bit of a timeline about our firm. And it's a firm I founded in 1987. And over the last 35 or so years, we've been pretty persistent in picking opportunities a little bit ahead of everyone else. And that's been the hallmark of our firm. We've been involved in over $2 billion worth of transactions. And I've been fortunate enough to generate returns in excess of 30% during this time. And you'll see that recently we moved heavily into industrial, which we'll talk a teeny bit about towards the tail end of this discussion. But we were early pioneers in self-storage. We foresaw the credit crisis coming in 2007 and created an opportunity fund in anticipation of that, bought a bunch of assets during the downturn. And then we were one of the early guys in buying multi in the Southeast value-add properties in 2011. But in 2015-16, I started having a revelation that I felt was going to be the greatest change in my career, which is what was happening in industrial real estate. The kind of confluence of e-commerce, and this was 2016. Today it seems obvious, but in 2016, e-commerce was taking off. It was clear to me that this was a trend that was not going to stop. COVID obviously accelerated this by a number of years. But we were so convinced about this that we sold all our residential properties in 2016 and about $500 million worth of properties and moved fully into industrial. And so we can, so where are you going next slide? No. Okay. So you guys today are going to hear about from other speakers, these topics. So I'm not going to dwell on them too long, but they are having a great impact on real estate as well. The biggest thing of all here, obviously, is what's going on with computing and our AI and machine learning, and what's coming with quantum computing, which is going to completely accelerate the pace of computations. What this all means to us as a firm, and when we think about, and we have a venture capital business as well, is I believe that in the next 10 years, we'll see a pace of innovation that will exceed what's occurred over the last 100 years, if not further. And this is going to be driven by the ability to absorb data and make sense of data at an ever-increasingly rapid pace. And now we're going to layer in things like automation, driverless cars, robotics, and then the biggest thing probably of all, which is people's access to data is growing exponentially. So smartphone penetration in 2008 was 22% globally. Today it's over 80% and it's going to go over 90% in the next 5 years. So what does that mean? When the whole world has access to data, number one, information becomes greater. Number two, transparency becomes greater. And transparency for an investor is not a good thing, because where we used to make our money was kind of the the shadows, if you will, the legal shadows of real estate. So for example, if you bought a property and you knew the guy next door had gotten money back on a tax surcharge because, he fought his taxes, that might be something that the seller of the property I'm buying doesn't know about. Today, it's in the war room of the property if you're buying it. So that arbitrage is gone. That's a small example. But more and more, what's going to happen here, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit, as data continues to increase, returns in real estate are going to be driven down to a mean. And because everyone's working with the same information, and so the way you're going to make money in the future, in my opinion, is trying to be a little ahead of where everyone else is thinking. And it's trying to kind of synthesize and figure out the future is where money's going to be made. The other thing that's going on here, which is prolific, it's obviously just the amount of interaction that's going on right now. It's with social media. That's a huge topic, and we're still very early in this and trying to figure out what this all means. Today kids are being born with cell phones in their cribs. I mean, I can visualize a world where a baby's sitting, the mother's nursing a baby, she's on the internet with her phone, and she's looking for diapers, and the kid's lovingly looking up to the mother and saying, "Mom, you gotta look at Walmart, it's got better diapers." I mean, this is where we're headed. All right, now the kid can't talk, so she's thinking of it. But the point of the matter is today, this is part of their culture, right? I mean, our era, and my father, who's 94, is on Amazon now. And part of that was due to the fact that he had no choice during COVID to figure out how to log in. But now he's hooked. So I guess the point of the matter is we're embracing technology at a pace which is we've never seen before, and we're still really early in the game. The other factor, again, that's kind of something that's flowing through us is just demographic changes. So my era is kind of moving off the scene. The younger era is coming in again because they're so indoctrinated with technology early on. It's going to continue to increase the pace of the absorption of what technology can do, right? So what does this mean for real estate? When I refer to this very simple graph of analog and digital, I'm not just talking about the physical change. I'm talking about also mindset. And so where I think the great opportunities are going to be at what I call the inflection point of when things move from analog to digital. Think about the Dollar Shave guy, for example. It's not a real estate related thought, but here's a guy who went online, decided he was going to start selling razor blades when everyone used to pay $7 a blade at Target. And he all of a sudden he was selling it for $1, right? So that was an inflection point where the old world was now being changed from the new world. That's when you make money. And that's that applies to real estate too, and it's your viewpoint of how assets look. It's a viewpoint on areas to invest, geographic areas to invest that may be overlooked. And so we focus on trying to think about where things are going, and that's a good example of that. And also I want to just point out that we look for big secular changes. And that's also the theme in our venture business. We're really looking for things that are going to withstand downturns. We don't focus on that significantly. We don't leverage our properties too highly. But what we really think about is momentum in themes that have no choice but to continue to move forward. All right, next page. So what I'm going to talk about now is, and I'm going to move pretty quickly because this is a pretty meaty topic, but I'm going to go through a whole bunch of stuff, different kind of property types and things that I see. And obviously what's near and dear to my heart is logistics. We'll talk about that at the tail end of this. But again, that property type is undergoing one of the major changes that I have seen and that I will ever see in my lifetime. Life sciences obviously are exploding. COVID was again, maybe an initiator of this, but what's really pushing that again is quantum computing, artificial intelligence, drug discovery over the next 10 years is going to be enormous. So factories, lab, all those, that kind of research, that's all going to be a huge topic, and it's only getting bigger. And so I'm a big bull on life sciences. Obviously, the amount of data we're creating is growing exponentially. How that's stored is a big topic, so data centers. Huge fan right now of secondary cities. I'll call lifestyle cities. I love areas like Boise, Montana. Boise, Idaho. I like Bozeman, Montana. These are smaller markets, and there are many in between there that are places where people are migrating to because, again, they can work there. And they can, and employers are actually some of the employers in the world today they don't really care where you work. Austin is obviously a great city that's moving. We're big believers in Phoenix. So this move into these areas is going to continue at an accelerated pace. Dark kitchens is a concept which, again, got the benefit from COVID when people started ordering out more. And so the concept around dark kitchens are kitchens which just have outgoing food service. They don't have any retail. And what you're seeing is restaurants started realizing that their retail business was being hurt by all the Uber guys coming in the middle of the meal and knocking people in the head as they were trying to get their takeout orders. And so firms are starting, the smart restaurateurs are separating that function into a remote facility. And these dark kitchens may have 4 or 5 different restaurants cooking in the same environment. So I think you're going to see more of those. Boutique office. Office is obviously a topic du jour. I still believe significantly in offices in the urban centers. Some smart investors are starting to buy aggressively in New York City, for example. This is a very interesting time to be looking at New York. What you're going to see is a shift from financial services companies to social media, to technology, and they want still a culture which is going to be best captured by people being in the offices. It may be 3 days a week, but they're going to be coming to the office, and people are going to want to come to the office. So I think we're going to continue to see offices. However, I'm not as sanguine about generic offices out in the suburbs, big glass buildings with no personality, no reason for being. It's kind of like retail too. A lot of retail just got built all over the place, and there was no reason for it. So euphoric retail, which I would call it, or even euphoric building of office buildings, are going to have their day of reckoning, and they're going to be repositioned or fail. Love lifestyle hotels right now. Don't like business hotels that cater more towards companies. I think that's going to be a long time coming back, if ever. What you're seeing in these convention hotels is that space being repurposed into something else. But lifestyle hotels, which cater to families, could be, we have a small hotel up in Montrose, Colorado, which is near Telluride. It's doing fantastically, did very well during COVID. Hunting, fishing, skiing, people driving through as they're sightseeing in that part of the world. Those kind of hotels, I think, are going to thrive in the years ahead. Everyone's talking about single-family rentals. I'm a big believer in those. They are a pain in the ass to manage. So you really want to have a concentrated area if you're going to be an owner. You'd like to have new product. So the concept of being able to rent in a home is going to continue, particularly in the Smile States. But I do think there's opportunities in the Northeast and other parts, just impossible to find the land to make it work on a rental basis. But that's going to be a big theme that continues, right? Love RV parks. People are buying more and more RVs. They want to get out. They can still work. Again, it's part of that whole theme of you can work pretty much anywhere now. And I think there's big opportunities. The RV park industry is a very fragmented industry. And a lot of these parks were kind of, they're run down, their dogs running around, scavenging. And I think there's an opportunity there to do something which is really beautiful and enhance the experience. And so RV parks is a place that I'd be looking at heavily. Studios are going to continue to be an important part of this. You're seeing a big push into markets like Atlanta, LA, New York, and those are driven by tax incentives that the states allow. But we're going to need more and more content to fill the thirst from people who have these phones and also obviously watching in their house. So I think studios are going to continue to be a really interesting place to play. It's a very specific skill set that you need to own and manage these. Shared offices, I think we're going to see more and more flexibility in leasing, and you talk about offices. But landlords are going to be doing this directly. I think the WeWorks of the world will get disintermediated over time because landlords are going to realize that why do they want to pay the arbitrage to the intermediary? So they'll hire a third-party firm to manage for them. But they will offer short-term leases in kind of cool environments, and I think we're going to see that continue to proliferate. Universities are absolutely fascinating. The pace of innovation coming out of universities, the social life around universities are going to continue. I think that there's a university, I think it's Arizona State, where they built a facility for seniors who can go to the football games, who can attend classes. And more that's going to continue. And universities are going to be a hub, for a full lifestyle, not just young adults coming into school. At the same turn, I don't think we're going to see the survival of secondary colleges, smaller universities. I think they're going to become obsolete. So student housing around those would be something I'd be nervous about. I like student housing in general, but it's got to be major, I think for us, these major universities with big healthcare networks, because those are the universities, in my opinion, that are going to thrive in the future. The other thing that you're going to see more and more of is the repurposing of real estate, old buildings, old walls. As we shift in society and those properties become obsolete, they're going to be repurposed, and there's opportunities to buy these properties cheaply. The key thing then is also convincing the municipalities that the zoning that doesn't work for today's era. That's a big problem right now with the shift from retail to, let's say, industrial. They're still trying to get educated, and there's resistance from residents, and they'd rather sit in a dormant mall than have a vibrant industrial park, for example. So that's going to have to be navigated through, but it will over time. This is really more of a theme, the democratization. Just 1 second. Let's go back up 1 second. More and more, we're going to see the ability to invest online in kind of like the Robin Hood-esque mode, which is crowdfunding. I think that business is really just starting to move. It's getting accepted. And as the younger generation continues to move up and get more educated about this, we're going to see more and more money raised online for real estate through crowdfunding. And so I'm a big believer in crowdfunding. And it's going to have to be closely monitored from a regulatory standpoint. It's susceptible to fraud, as is a lot of things. But I do think crowdfunding is going to be really fascinating.
So we've had a couple of leading guys in crowdfunding speak at our events, and I think that they said that there had been a limitation on the amount of crowdfunding. It went from 1 million to 5 or 10 million now. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are in real estate. And actually, a lot of people think that tokenization of assets will lead to a lot more crowd participation.
Well, I'm not sure about the limitations, because a firm like CrowdStreet, for example, just raised 25 million in 20 minutes. And so it depends upon the offering. I mean, we can get into Bitcoin and what's going to happen with blockchain. Blockchain will be an important part of the future of real estate. There's no question about it. You're going to see the need for title companies are going to move away. It's just inherently the right way to conduct business. It's just going to take a generation for that to come into play. And I do think the currency, like we were talking about,
Tokenization, yeah.
I think so, but it's going to be a while still. And there was one other thing. Well, this is an important one. So I think we're going to continue to see the fusion of real estate technology and business. As you think about it as an investor, I'll give you an example. We recently invested in a company called Fabric, like clothing, which is a company that focuses on the automation of what's called micro-fulfillment centers. So micro-fulfillment centers are warehouses that are located right next to major cities. And their sole purpose is to move goods as quickly as possible out to consumers or business to business in kind of a few hours. And so we think that the automation of warehouses is going to be a huge theme going forward, particularly on places like near the city, because the cost of labor and the availability of labor is going to continue to be a nagging headache. And companies are going to need to solve that problem. Okay, Ryan. So of all the things we just talked about, the one that really feels to me like the most promising is industrial real estate. You're reading about it, you can't pick up the Wall Street Journal today without hearing about industrial real estate. I still think we are incredibly early in the transformation of kind of the old world industrial to the new world industrial, analog, if you will, to digital. And we're setting up what I call the perfect storm for industrial, which is driven obviously by e-commerce, and that's a horse that's just going to continue to grow. As we think about e-commerce is going to not only be accelerated by the continued use and penetrations of cell phones, but also technology such as the metaverse, where you're going to walk in, with an avatar of you walking into Bloomingdale's and trying on clothes and talking to the salesperson, and they're going to know your size, and you're going to buy the goods online, and they'll be in your house the next day or two. This is going to happen, and this is going to continue to push the need for industrial. And the other thing that I'm seeing is industrial. You read about Amazon and all these big guys are taking big spaces, but the real play in industrial going forward is going to be the middle market companies, the ones that are changing from analog world to digital world, where they didn't have really direct-to-consumer part of their business, and now they realize they need to. And that's a business that's just starting. We're in the top of the first inning because they're always slower than reacting because they don't have the mindset, they don't have the resources to focus on it. But when the competitors start doing it, they have no choice. And so we're in that move now where you're going to see middle market companies push, and that's why we, as a firm right now, like smaller spaces, like 100,000 feet and under. We think there's big demand there. We have a huge portfolio in southern New Jersey, which is 0.9% vacancy. And we continue to raise rents, and the folks who are in there continue to pay. And so we're going to see more and more of that, I think, tightening of demand around these kind of spaces. The other thing that's happening, obviously, that I talked about is the fact that people want their goods faster and faster. They want them in hours. You know, it used to be, what, it was 4 days, and the world changed when Amazon went from 2 day to 1 day. And that was only a few years ago, when we think about it. And now consumers are saying, I want it even faster than that. Matter of fact, Amazon and a lot of these companies have AI and technology, which is basically thinking in negative time. In other words, they're anticipating what you're going to want. And that's how their goods are being moved around during their supply chain. And there's going to be actually in the future, for those who opt into this, actually forced deliveries. You're going to know that you need batteries for a doll you bought 6 months ago, and you can just return it. So it's a world that's going to be very interesting to see unfold.
So another quick remark. So I was buying a TV set to run an event in Miami, and I went to Walmart, 65-incher, and they said they didn't have it. They said you can buy it online. An online store delivered it in 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
2-hour deliveries.
Yeah. No, it's really, Amazon, you know what's interesting about Walmart, just as a quick aside, Walmart has huge footprints on, in their stores. They're realizing that they don't need a third of that space. And so what they're doing, and they're starting it out in Fabric, the company I talked about before is one of those guys working with them, is they're taking the last third of the space and they're making them micro-fulfillment. So that they're not going to be they're going to be just strictly outgoing, right? More and more of these guys, and that's an example of how you're seeing companies repurpose their real estate. So let's go to this slide, and then I can take some questions, a couple more slides here. All right, so this is a really interesting example, and again, I think it's really kind of pulls together what I'm talking about this morning, which is a property that we bought in Philadelphia about a couple of years ago. And this was a really decrepit, terrible-looking warehouse. It kind of gives you a little picture here. The warehouse is actually extended behind this building. But this was a property that was brought to our attention, and all the local guys, all the local industrial guys there passed on the deal. And they said, oh, Philadelphia, this part of Philadelphia, South Philadelphia, very dangerous. The building was in shape. I mean, the windows were broken, the roofs were leaking, and particularly pretty looking building. And, but when we looked at it, and we saw something different. Marty, go to the next slide. We saw a property that sat next to 4 million people, and you can see the density on the left of Philadelphia a little bit. And then also on the right, but you got 95, 76, the airport, the port, and you have this building there, and we just said, this is the last mile facility. I mean, this was before the term was actually fully coined. Today, everything's last mile. No matter where you go, they say it's last mile. It's really not. But and what's interesting about this building, by the way, you can see the shape of it. It was actually a subway repair facility. So we had rail lines running through the middle of the building. I mean, this is part of the reasons why guys turn their nose on up at it. But we wound up buying the property. We put a bunch of money into it, and we're rewarded, Marty, with the next. So I leased the whole building to Amazon. And again, so now the local guys who are the analog thinkers are seeing and say, oh my God, look at that guy. How did they do that? And again, as long as you're going to continue to think in the analog world, that's what's going to happen to those guys. You got to be thinking about the world, in a digital framework.
Do you want to share the ROI of that investment?
200%. The ROI, I'm sorry, the IRR was 200. I think we were probably a 5x on that in about 15 months. So it was a good deal for us. And also, I think it's an ironic situation because the rent we got there, which has been out in the press at $11.75 a foot, when we hit on the road, $7. Now it's used as a comp, and it's completely accelerated the whole market. So we unfortunately shot ourselves in the foot. I guess we'll take that trade, but eventually now we're pretty high and buildings are going up like crazy every day there. So anyway, so that's kind of the essence of the speech, Marty. I mean, I can talk about Zillow and all the other stuff, but this is kind of where we're at. Right now, Wharton has two funds that they're raising money on. One is a property fund where we continue to buy more and more of these properties, and particularly on the East Coast, and we like the Southeast, and we like Arizona a lot. We're actually about to hopefully break ground in a 1.5 million square foot industrial development out there in an area called Mesa. And then our second fund is a land fund, a development fund. We still believe significantly in infill developments. And again, everything for us right now is all about industrial, not just on our real estate business, but also we believe fully in what's happening with e-commerce and related industries on our venture side.
Let's go to questions. Yep, Ron?
How do you feel about the availability of debt?
Debt?
Yeah, are you finding that?
I've never seen the markets more liquid in my life. And the reason is funds are being raised at a prolific rate from LPs. And so what's happening, these guys are battling themselves now to get it out. Too much money's been raised. And so the beneficiaries are guys like us, when we go out to auction, so we run a process if we're getting debt. And the guys are killing themselves to put money out for the right project. So that is very available, very creative. I do worry about rates, and I think one of the things people say, what keeps you up at night, I'm a pretty good sleeper, but I think interest rates are things that loom, and we've been in this fantasy land of low rates for a while, and so what's happening today is that, let's say with industrial buildings, for example, you buy an Amazon building, you can pay a 4 cap for it, but the guys who are buying it are putting on 2.5% debt. So they're getting a 5 or 6 or 7% cash on cash, which is fantastic, but it's a financial engineering play. They could be paying $300 a foot for that building when replacement cost is $200. That's a bad game for us. So I think the music stopped at some point. I don't know when, but rates are going to go up. And when they do, all the deals that are being cut with floating rate debt, highly leveraged debt, I think it's going to be a factor that's going to hurt the real estate business. However, there's so much money sitting around, it's going to create an artificial floor where you may see prices dropping, but there's going to be so many guys trying to chase that distressed asset that it's going to raise the boat back up again. Until we get through this preponderance of money that's out there on the debt and equity side, real estate's going to be a safety net for a lot of capital.
I had a lot of questions, so maybe you can do 30 seconds on each one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Besides China, so I think you talked about how there's so much data that's out there, right? More than ever, arbitrages are gone. How important is speed in what you're doing? You were talking about boutique hotels, and I was thinking about branding in the real estate, because branding is really something that, because of social media, you can get brand out there and find the right guy, right? So there's a guy, Ed Goodman, who used to run a big, venture capital firm here, and he would say, in the old days, for me to market something, it would cost me 15 million. Now because of the internet, I can do it for 500,000, right? So branding, and then materials. Some thoughts on that, and maybe you can just speed, brand, materials.
All right, well, let me start with materials is obviously a humongous problem right now, getting deliveries of products to build. Also, the costs are quadrupling. It is a real terror. However, I do believe that we are at the peak of this problem and that it will work its way out as the supply chain starts to loosen up, and it will. This is going to be a number of months before still. I don't think it's years. So, I mean, it's concerning right now because we're starting a big project and we have to price it out. But ironically, what's happening here is that developers are all in the same boat. And unfortunately, the guys who are getting hit with this is the end user, which is the tenant. And they're all paying the rent. So passing on the increases to tenants is something which has to happen. No one has any choice. And the amazing thing about it is the tenants are paying it. And the reason tenants are paying it, first of all, is, again, the fever of what's happening in industrial, but also rent in the supply chain is about 5% of the cost. The real cost is labor and transportation. And so whether it's 5% or 7%, if you need to be in Phoenix, you're going to be in Phoenix, whether you're going to pay $8,000 a foot or $10,000 a foot. So some of that's being absorbed. It will be interesting though when costs recede, which they will. Price, I can guarantee you, landlords are not going backwards in rent.
And speed, like how fast do you have to act on deals these days, or I mean, where you're playing, it's not so obvious, right? Or I'm asking,
Speed is crucial, credibility is crucial, capital, you have to have capital at your fingertips. Now, for those, and I lectured, and Marty said, at Columbia Business School, and I talked to the students there, and I said, when you think about capital, you don't always necessarily have to have it on hand, but what you need to be doing is cultivating capital all the time, going to events like this, meeting people, asking them what they're interested in. So when that deal comes in, you make those phone calls. That's how we did it when we started. We bootstrapped ourselves up today where we have our own money. But getting started, don't worry about it if you don't have it. The thing is controlling the deal. But most importantly is continue to nurture those relationships while you're trying to figure out where the deals are. That's it.
and number three was branding. So that was, there was the whole question of, it seems like boutique hotels can brand themselves really fast now with social media, where they couldn't, you have to put ads.
Branding, public relations, all this, because of social media, is so crucial to differentiate yourself. In a world which is getting bathed in kind of, there's so much of everything, how do you stand out? And so branding and the use of social media is crucial. Social media is a two-edged sword, particularly in hospitality, because you're going to get guys on, and you got to be vigilant about this. When someone says, they didn't have soap in my room, I'm never going to go here again, right? Because usually the comments you see online are negative comments, not positive comments.
And my last one, so, you made this tremendous return in Philadelphia on that warehouse, and if you look at the location, it always looks great after the fact, right?
Right.
It makes perfect sense. But so how do you time your deals? And before you talk about it, I'm gonna talk about all those guys who jumped into warehouse industrial in 2009, 2010, and got crushed having, warehouse properties in, Garden State Parkway, exit 7, exit 8 of the New Jersey Turnpike. Those are famous stories of guys who lost their shirt, but you seem to have not, you've avoided that. So how do you do timing? How do you time and figure out when the timing is right to jump in?
I listen, I think a lot of it is just reading, but ultimately it's a feeling in my belly and if you look at 2008, 9, 10, when those guys were doing that, the internet was still in its early stages. Again, 22% of the population had cell phones, smartphones. Today it's 80 plus. And so we are dealing with a force of e-commerce that will never go back, right? So what happened then was the pull and the demand from e-commerce wasn't enough to drag these guys out of their problem. Today, we're in a different spot. And interestingly enough, I would argue that probably of all the asset classes, what I like about industrial is I think it's somewhat immune to downturn. People are still going to buy online. There's still going to be guys, companies that are going to want to, continue their online presence. And so that self-storage to some extent, there are a few asset classes I like in downturns, but kind of the combination of the upside in industrial and the protection and the big macro change. Think about any asset class. You tell me whether office buildings. What do you do with an office building? You make it a little smarter as far as its climate control, or it's not affected by anything in a dramatic way. Industrial is like this monster wave that's going over these properties. And the other thing I will say, and I'm not going to give away all our secrets here, is what we really are focusing on now is secondary locations. So everyone's going to exit AA, as you referred to, and Philadelphia's now become hot. But there are plenty of other places where there's the big demand for feeding the consumers that are not as obvious. That's where the play is going to be in industrial going forward. It's going to be filling out this kind of neural network of supply chain and picking where those spots are today, when you can start, still buy buildings with $50, $60, $70 a square foot at rents that are $5 or $6. That's going to be gone in the next few years.
So I do have one last question again. My last question. So you were talking about RV parks, and so we know that like the whole mobile home park business is shrinking because no city will license any new mobile home parks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to RV parks, is that a growing? Are they consolidating also in terms of our so I have a family office who used to own mobile home parks in Menlo Park and in Sacramento and in San Jose, all in California, right? And they've been selling them off at $100 million per the last 5-10 years to Google and Facebook, et cetera. And so are RV parks, are they not situated inside cities? Can you give some perspective on that? Like you said, it's a hot area.
Look, RV parks, in Menlo Park doesn't have a reason for being an RV park anymore. I mean, you know, so that mobile home park, for example, it's too expensive. But parts of South Carolina, North Carolina, you know, Central Florida,
Arizona.
they're embracing those still there. They want retirees. They shop in Kmart. I mean, so it depends upon where it is. It may be over time that those areas again also become so hot that that are used for something else. But I think it's a long time coming. And so zoning is something you have to look at clearly. But you want to go to a place that wants you. So I think there's a lot left there.